Welcome to the show, whether you're joining us via Community TV as New Game Plus or Community Radio as Z Games. This episode, usually these kinds of episodes will have like a discussion in the studio, but we're just going to have the intro in the studio. My name's Jack, this is Meg. Hey.
Hey.
And
my favourite time of week, we're back again.
So good. Yeah. We're back, you can't get rid of us, I swear to God.
My work life. It's great to be here.
That's exactly what this is, love this. We were at Melbourne International Games Week for a little bit.
Yeah, if fans of the show are out there watching this episode, you'll know very well it's like my Christmas, and it was one of the best weeks of my career / ever. Jack and I hung out quite a fair bit, and I experienced GCAP and PAX Oz and everything in between. The parties, the drinks, the socialising, the networking. It was fabulous.
Drinks and socialising are different?
Yeah, this episode's full of content that we worked really hard on producing for New Game Plus and Z Games.
Yeah.
But also gets into some nitty-gritty stuff that we haven't really covered before in the show.
Yeah, the next 3 weeks are going to be a little bit different, where like all of it's coming from like the field. So coming up this episode, we're going to be talking with the Cyberpunk 2077 developer.
This is crazy.
They had one of their developers, the studio director, I think, from the Crack House studio, in for PAX Oz. We spoke with him. Kosh from Z Games was doing that interview.
He killed that.
Phoebe Watson is working on Chaos Tavern. She is a sort of consulting on a lot of like First Nations sort of implementation in that game with the local team.
Yes.
But the one that we worked on together the most was the Working Lunch Next exhibit.
Yes, I'm super proud of this actually. It came up so well, and we worked really hard on it, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. It's fantastic.
So yeah, all of that is coming up in this episode. So let's get right on into it.
Enjoy.
Hey there, Koshi and Brendan here at PAX Australia, and today we're joined by John Mamias from CD Projekt Red to talk about Cyberpunk 2077. So, first of all, tell us about yourself.
So I'm the head of the CD Projekt Red Krakow studio, basically. In the Krakow studio, there's two studios in Poland currently working on Cyberpunk. The Warsaw, it's like I think it's like 300 plus people working on. There's a lot more people working there, but just on the game, so there's 300 plus, and then we have like 100 plus in Krakow working on the game. So my job is to basically manage the studio in Krakow, grow it and manage it, and I'm managing production there as well.
So for people who aren't here at PAX Australia this weekend, can you tell us what we've got on display from Cyberpunk?
A booth that's in the Microsoft booth currently that we're taking part of. With our publisher for Australia is Namco Bandai, right? Yep. But they're sharing like this Microsoft booth. So we've got like some cosplayers there, and then we've got a kind of a gameplay trailer running that you can go see. I think it's about 15 minutes. And there's also, every day we're showing a 45-minute like gameplay. I guess it's called Deep Dive. It's actually just a gameplay demo and based in some part of the game. So a lot of people are seeing that, and there's one more today, and that's basically it. Yeah.
And so they're walking you through, like someone will be playing the game and showing off all the cool features and.
Not in the booth. It's just like it's like played back. It's like kind of like played back every 15 minutes. But the big presentation, it's a live presentation. So somebody's playing it and somebody else is talking about it. Well, demo is really critical to introducing the game to people, right? It's but not only that, it also provides a way for us to take our ideas, which are quite disparate in the studio that we're developing. Like, it's a big team, right? Lots of different people working on it in different departments. So we need to put those things together and make sure that the game for us internally feels right. So it's the demo. We do it for shows like E3 or for PAX. But it also helps us internally.
What's something that you're expecting to see from gamers once when they've played Cyberpunk 2077 for the first time?
Well, we hope that they get so pulled into the universe that we don't hear from them for a while. So it's like that's the idea, is to like really suck them into the universe. And it's a single player game, so. It's a long game, so it's like you should jack in theoretically, metaphorically speaking, and then we'll see you, in like a couple more days from now. And when you come out, you should be amazed, I hope. So.
Can you tell us more about the new abilities in Cyberpunk 2077?
It's an RPG, so there is a set list of attributes that you build up in the game, and there's also a set of skills attached to those attributes. So. I don't have the list in my head, but that's essentially how you're building your character. You you gain experience, and then with those experience points, you can level up your attributes, and then you can also get perks along the way, which you can use to level up your skills. And there's a lot of different ways you can play. So you can be a stealthy character, or you can be like a solo kind of I don't know how you would, like a run and gun type character. Yeah, or you can be like a hacking kind of netrunner type, or you can combine them. Kind of the essence of what we're trying to achieve is kind of a fluid class system in the game. So you don't pick one class, you kind of mix and match, and depending on how you like to play, that's where you put most of your points.
Cool. So since E3, the big talking point, what happened, the big reveal of Keanu Reeves is going to be in the game.
Yeah.
What kind of part does he play in the game with the main character?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much has been said about Keanu. It's because it's kind of spoilerish to talk about him about him too much. He's going to be with you in some way throughout the entire game. He has a lot of. He's like a major kind of character throughout the entire game. So, but you'll have to wait and see, what his role actually is.
What was it like to work with Keanu Reeves on Cyberpunk 2077?
I didn't work with him directly, but a lot of the guys that I work with have worked with him, and what they say is like, what you hear about Keanu is like he's just like genuinely a really cool and nice guy, and that's what they're saying about him as well. So he's a pro, so he's like really fun to work with in terms of his professionalism, and so he's helping us as much as like we're working and using his talent for the game. So it's kind of it's a nice working relationship. Yeah.
All of the you said 300 people are working at the Krakow.
That's 100 in Krakow, and in Warsaw it's more than 300. So on the project in total, it's between 400 and 500 people, I think, working on the game.
So we've got all of those people working on the game. Have you experienced any times of like crunch time, the normal
crunch time?
Yeah, well, 100-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks type deal when you end up going through that type of.
There's been a lot like written and talked about, crunch time with us and with other game developers, and we don't really like to talk about it too much because it's a little bit too controversial, and we're more here like to talk about the game and not about like the working life around the game.
After Cyberpunk 2077, what would be the next step for CD Projekt Red? I
wish I could announce something like that, right? That's like a big news story. So it's like that's something that I'm not allowed to talk about. And there will be a time when we like go out in public and say, okay, we're going to do this next and stuff. So right now, it's like the only thing that we are really allowed to, and we should talk about is just focusing on this release, because this is it's all consuming in terms of resources, and so it's very important for us to just like keep our eye on the ball.
What is the most exciting thing that players who don't know about the game, what would you want to tell them to get them excited for it if they are trying to stay under a rock as much as possible? That's
a good question. It's hard to know what gamers expect. I think since it's like us making the Cyberpunk game, I think what you can be excited about is that it's going to be a really strong RPG and a really awesome story, right? So it's like if that's the kind of, and if you're into single player RPGs with strong story, I think this is like your cup of tea. So hopefully we'll like deliver that in spades. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us here at PAX Australia. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and able to actually check out some of Australia.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I'm at GCAP 2019 at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre, and I'm joined by Phoebe Watson. Hello.
Hello.
Just did a talk on Indigenous themes in games. Would you mind going a little bit into, or briefly, into what the talk was about and your background and expertise in this field as well?
Yep, so I just did a talk about Indigenous culture in games, a little bit about the importance of it, and kind of how society can benefit from it. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the processes that I've recently experienced as like an incredible like newbie into this industry. The processes that I took, the ways that, how it failed, how it went well, and how to kind of go about that from an Indigenous perspective. For people who are really interested in putting Indigenous culture in games, and if you're not Indigenous yourself, and kind of the processes to go about to including that stuff.
And a lot of that kind of came out of the work that you're doing with the studio and on a game at the moment. Can you go into a little bit of detail around that project specifically as well?
Yeah, so first, before all of that, I was actually doing some mentoring for Indigenous kids. And through that, I got to really see the importance of sharing culture. And then I met Paulina at Dragon Bear Studios, and they were after someone to go out and do these consultations because they were really keen to get some Indigenous content into a video game. They are very, very forward in wanting to include something that's new, that hasn't really been done in kind of like a new way. So not reinventing fantasy, but steering it in a new direction that can be more inclusive for everybody. And so what they have really helped me do is guide me through kind of the processes of what they need. And then I've gone to speak to community and come back with some feedback and then maybe suggestions on what we want to put into the game.
In your talk, you spoke a little bit to there being traditional stories out there, but trying to shy away from putting those stories in games, or maybe speaking to some of the dangers of putting those stories in games verbatim, and instead potentially reframing them, I guess, for games. Can you go into a little bit of detail as to why it might be less than ideal to put those traditional stories in games verbatim?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways you can take this. I think there's still a lot of benefit from directly showcasing those stories, but that will need a lot of collaboration with Indigenous people in the processes, obviously. It's still very important, but I think there's a bit of reservation from Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples about putting our stories out there on this platform, because
there's this sort of mistrust that it won't be done justice.
There's a lot of mistrust that it won't be done justice respectfully, but it's things like you see boomerangs being sold that are made in China. That it's happened before. So there's a lot of that. So hopefully by doing what we're doing at Dragon Bear Studios is kind of taking it as a core inspiration and then showcasing, okay, this really can present some real stuff, right? And then hopefully moving forward into that.
You also brought up some games that have spoken to traditional stories, Never Alone and Virtual Songlines, and I've had the opportunity to speak with Brett about his work on Virtual Songlines previously. What are some of the other games out there potentially that you've seen or projects that have done justice in trying to tell or educate more broadly about Indigenous First Nations peoples?
Honestly, there's not a lot. I know there's projects out there. I know there are a lot of small projects. I don't know their names, and I haven't had the opportunity to play them. There's definitely some made by Indigenous communities for that community and schools specifically. There are some possible projects in the future that I've heard of, which is really exciting. But as of right now,
it's pretty slim pickings.
Unfortunately, it is, yeah.
You also said to developers, if you're wanting to tell these stories, and you spoke to why it's important to tell these stories, that you reach out to community, but you spoke to your difficulty in trying to reach out to community and gaining their trust and getting the sort of knowledge that you need to be able to go back to Dragon Bear and do that work there. What sort of resources are available for developers that are looking to potentially implement some of those ideas in their games, but if they don't have a connection to community like yourself, how might they go about finding information to sort of get started?
Yeah, it's a really difficult process. I really wanted to inspire, it's a bit of an opposing thing to talk about in my talk, but I really wanted to inspire people to do it, but also be very realistic. It's difficult. You need to be super passionate about this. There are definitely organizations out there. What you can do is that communities for each land group, they have their own kind of organizations and orgs that you could reach out to. You could do some research into the land you're on and then try and Google some organizations for that and possibly reach out to them because they will know elders and community members and they can kind of help liaise between the two groups. I think that's the best because I'm not entirely sure. I know there are groups out there, but I don't know the names of their groups.
A lot of the specifics.
Specifics for games, particularly.
You ask developers to, instead of making these or highlighting these stories or making sure that players pay attention to them, instead of doing it for financial gain, to do it to try and preserve these stories and not be so much about, oh, we just need to chase profits and all the rest of it. The reality is that so many developers don't have the bandwidth to allocate resources to different stories, and if they're not invested in the First Nations peoples or indigenous peoples, it might be difficult for them to allocate those resources if they aren't able to make a living off of it, basically. Do you believe that's one of the main reasons that we're not seeing more of these stories?
Potentially, I think a lot of it is fear, non-Indigenous people feeling like they can't go about this. I know...
From people that are outside of the community, you mean?
Yeah, people who are outside the community they are aware that it would be great because everyone's aware that representation needs to be more inclusive, but again, not knowing the processes, feeling like they can't do it because they're not Indigenous.
It can be intimidating, yeah.
It's very intimidating when you go up against that because there's so much tension and issues in the past, for sure. And that's definitely a good point, is not having the resources just to give your time into.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's very difficult.
If people want to know more about your work or about the work that you're doing with Dragon Bear, where can they find out more online?
Yep, so we have a website up for Chaos Tavern, so it's chaostavern.com. You can also just chuck me a follow on Twitter at Phoebe Jane W. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. But yeah, it's all on Dragon Bear and Chaos Tavern are also on Twitter, so we have a lot of updates on there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Phoebe.
All right, thank you.
The next exhibit is a Working Lunch Collective initiative and showcases games made by indie developers from underrepresented communities. It's exciting because this year the theme is Made by Hand, which talks about the human stories behind game development. The space is a lot more open this year, which allows for attendees to come and hang out. But also game developers can come and talk about their games and their experiences within the industry. There are playable demos here from Australia and New Zealand developers as well.
We wanted to showcase not only these games made by underrepresented developers, but also the team themselves and people behind these games and what goes into making these real heartfelt games. So we have little posters of about the team, about the game, some behind the scenes stuff of like early concepts and sketches.
And showing that journey.
Yeah, and people have really responded to that. It's a really great insight into what goes on with developers because we've got it written on one of the boards, developers are people. And yeah, people really love that they're seeing a little insight into the life of a game developer.
There are 4 games on display. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Yeah, so we've got Dollhouse, which is sort of an interactive dollhouse in a video game. There's no like win state or fail state. You're just free to kind of explore what is essentially a dollhouse with like beds, tables, chairs, little dolls, able to move around, and it really draws on that, I guess, childlike...
Like nostalgia?
Nostalgia, yes.
Yeah. And I've seen my personal favorite, the dog dating simulation game, Best Friend Forever. If you haven't seen it, check it out online at the moment. But can you tell us a little bit about how that's...
So that is a dating simulator cross dog care simulator. Yes. You do not date the dogs, but it's like a visual novel, so kind of in the style of something like Dream Daddy.
Yeah.
Where you create a character and you're moving to this new neighborhood, in a new city. And you have a dog, and then all your romantic options also have dogs. And you take care of your dog while meeting people, and maybe sparks fly. And
my heart is so full with this novelty right now. And I saw there's like a lot of granular things you can do to increase your dog's skills, and the activities you do reflect your relationship with your puppy, which is really wholesome.
You can pat the dog as you go on. You just click she's ball.
Now, there's also, next to this game, is the Continental Drift. That's a totally different shift in genres. Can you talk to me about that?
It's amazing. When I played it, I had shivers. It's like this, it's an in-browser game looking at themes of loneliness and where you belong. I think it's based on the developer's own experiences with moving around and trying to find where you belong. It's a really beautiful game. Yeah.
And the 4th title here on display is Unpacking, which is another really exciting indie title. And I love it because I guess it's a relaxing take at your own leisure. I guess Another really aesthetically beautiful title.
Yeah. Unpacking is also like another great one. It's super zen.
Yeah.
And the developer, I was actually here earlier today talking about how it came out of her and her partner, like when they moved in together, they turned their unpacking into a game, like themselves, because they'd finish a box and it was like,
oh, how
it's
it's such an achievement.
Yeah, they gamified it.
Yes.
And so they turned that into a game, and it's really cute. It's so relaxing. The music is quite calming. But also just like the pixel aesthetic of it is super cute.
Isn't it? It's irresistible.
And it's adorable, like organizing things. It's great.
While next exhibit only happens once a year at PAX Australia, other events from the Working Lunch run throughout the year. Taking part in multiple states across Australia and New Zealand, the program's designed to help underrepresented people build a long-term sustainable career in the games industry. They do things like workshops, seminars, one-on-one and group mentoring sessions with influential and experienced people in the industry. To hear more about their experience with the Working Lunch, we spoke with Shane Strawbridge from the Adelaide cohort. I heard about a workshop on Twitter called The Working Lunch. Talk to me about that. We were like, this sounds interesting. How can I get involved?
So essentially the Working Lunch is a group for, it's for minority groups kind of thing. So underrepresented devs, that's right. Yeah. So it's mainly for women and non-binary folk. And so, if you tick those kinds of boxes, you can apply. And so I was looking at it and I was like, as a non-binary dev, I was like, I'm interested in this. So I put my name forward, did all the little paperwork, and a couple months later, I found myself joining the Working Lunch Adelaide cohort. It was a rather small group. It was about 10 to 12 people. And we would gather, I think, about monthly in a meeting room in Games Plus, which is our kind of central game development hub in Adelaide. Yeah, exactly. So we would gather there and we would go through the Working Lunch program, which we would cover stuff like, how to find a job within the work industry, safely engaging with your workers. If you were LGBT, how to, engage with your workplace and how to stay safe. We also covered, more broad topics like marketing your game and like how having to invoice people for money and stuff like that. With our mentors, we worked on very specific things. We tried to set ourselves some goals. Right. So my mentor was Ash McAllen. Awesome. And so we worked together I was a narrative specialist, and so was she. She really liked writing for tabletops and stuff like that. So we were working together to try and piece narrative together with other game design elements so that, it wouldn't be so niche and I could start branching out, start wearing many hats, as the phrase goes.
Do you feel like you learned a lot? And I guess, what was the ultimate goal for you for the program?
Well, ultimately, I just kind of wanted to take my opportunity for game development further, and it really worked. Like talking to Ash, she's put me in contact with a lot of great people.
Nice.
She was helping me, further my game development. She introduced me to a bunch of programs for game development and to help people get into game development. She even helped me get here to PAX. She's paid for my flights, and she, put me in contact with a couple of people to, chat and, learn some new things. So, I've really found a lot of benefits coming from the Working Lunch.
Now that you've completed it and you're sort of on the other side of it, do you feel like you can approach your next steps for your career in a different way that you wouldn't have in the past?
Yeah, when I first graduated, I wasn't, I was like, I'm not really sure where to go in games. I still felt very directionless. But now that I've gone through Working Lunch, I've really started to realize these are the things that I can do. I feel a lot more confident in myself as well. I feel like I could actually go out there and start making content and joining companies and working with other people. So yeah, I feel a lot more confident. I feel like my abilities have improved. I got more connections now. I feel like I made a lot more friends, both high up in the industry and lower down. So it's just really interesting.
And that's it for this week on the show. We've got way more coming up. We've always got way more coming up. There's always so much more. It doesn't matter whether you're watching this on TV as New Game Plus or radio as Z Games. We have all the links, Meg. Do you remember all the links?
NewGamePlus.tv, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram,
everywhere.
Facebook. We're on all the channels.
New Game Plus TV. If you want more podcasting, New Game Plus has a podcast. You can find it on iTunes and Spotify. Z Games is also there. zedgamesau.net is the website. You can find ZGamesAU on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you happen to be in Brisbane, first of all, sorry. But second of all, on Wednesdays at 6 p.m., you can listen to Z Games on 102.1 FM Triple Z on Wednesdays. Yeah. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.